Awesome. Well, again, thank you all for joining us today. My name is Keith Pearson. I'll be moderating today's webinar titled Traveling with Home Nutrition Support Advice from a Dietitian, Person with ALS, and Caregiver. I'm excited to introduce our speakers, Stephanie Doback, Ron Brady, and Carla Hill Brady. Stephanie Doback is a clinical dietitian at the Jefferson Weinberg ALS Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She is passionate about optimizing the nutrition status and quality of life of people with ALS. Her research interests include focusing on standardizing ALS nutrition care, discerning the ideal time for gastrostomy tube placement, investigating interventions to increase quality of life, and optimizing advanced care planning discussions surrounding G-tubes for people with ALS. Along with myself, Stephanie co-founded the ALS nutrition website alsnutrition.org, which is the only website dedicated exclusively to ALS nutrition professionals. Stephanie also serves as the co-chair for the nutrition subcommittee of the NEALS Consortium, leading multiple professionals in ALS nutrition-related projects and research collaborations. Ron Brady is a retired nonprofit education executive with 25 plus years experience impacting students from traditionally underserved populations in Philadelphia, New Jersey, and New York City. He was diagnosed with ALS in July 2020. Carla Hill Brady is a retired education and human services professional with over 20 years of experience serving high-need students and populations in New Jersey and Texas. Since 2020, when Ron was diagnosed with ALS, she has been the primary caregiver of her husband, Ron. Since his diagnosis, Ron and Carla have traveled extensively, acquired, renovated, furnished, and rented a small portfolio of properties in Burlington County, New Jersey, and spent time doting on their granddaughter. Together, they strive to fulfill Ron's commitment to live with ALS, not just die from it. So we're looking forward to the session, and you guys can take it away.
All right, thanks, Keith. And I'm super excited for Ron and Carla to be here too. I think it can be easy as clinicians to sit around and think tank about recommendations for our people with ALS, but it's so important to hear from pals and cows themselves and really learn from their experiences. These are disclosures that I have received grant funding from the Dietitians and Nutrition Support Dietetic Practice Group, as well as the ALS Foundation. And I do present webinars for functional formularies and receive a speaker honorarium for that. And Ron and Carla have no disclosures. These are our objectives today, is that by the end of the session, we want you to be able to list travel considerations with home parental and enteral nutrition, troubleshoot common EN complications, understand traveling with home EN from the perspective of a person with ALS and their caregiver. And I'll refer to those as PALS and CALS throughout the presentation. And, given that most nutrition support for PALS is centered around enteral nutrition, that's going to be our focus today. But I am going to briefly discuss some parental nutrition pointers before handing it off to Ron and Carla to share their enteral nutrition story. If you talk with anyone with ALS, most know the exact date in which they were diagnosed. And Ron's going to share his story today. And really, that was a day when their entire life changed. Even if they had been prepared and prepared themselves to hear that diagnosis. Then they have strangers in white coats talking to them about feeding tubes, a concept that they either never thought about or had maybe discussed with their loved one that they would never want. And even I came into the world of ALS thinking, why are we putting feeding tubes in people with a terminal disease? Is that even humane? And then I realized, and as many pals realized, that one can still have a good quality of life with a feeding tube. And I think people with ALS know that they have a limited time, right? And their priorities tend to shift. Many still want to travel despite having a feeding tube. So really, that's where we as clinicians and dietitians come in and can help them. So pals may want to travel to visit friends or families. They may have medical appointments in different states. They may be getting second or third or fourth opinions on things. And I didn't put it up there, but many still may be working and have to travel for work with their tube. Many see this as a time to knock items off their bucket list, and many people's bucket lists include traveling. Some people may just want to maintain a sense of normalcy despite the medical chaos that is going on in their world. So perhaps they travel to the shore every summer, and even though they have a feeding tube now, they still want to keep that tradition and get to the shore. So, whatever reason, we know people travel with home nutrition support. And so that really brings me to the next slide, and that we want to be proactive in inquiring about travel plans. Because pals may forget to mention that they're traveling, or not want to bother you and ask for your help. So I found it pretty helpful to ask questions like, in the springtime, what are your plans for the summer? Or right now in the fall, what are your plans for the upcoming holidays? Are you doing any traveling? And I think phrasing it in a way where it's almost expected that they're traveling opens up the conversation, because we know pals are probably traveling anyways. And so we really want to help talk about it up front, because we want to advise them on safety of traveling, making sure it's medically appropriate for them to travel. Do they have to have clearances from other providers? Where are they in their disease state? Where's their immune function? What are the concerns at their destination? Are there any sort of epidemics going on? So making sure that we optimize the safety for them. We want to be able to save pals time and frustration and planning. We don't want them to reinvent the wheel and have to look up the information themselves. They're already super busy. So how can we make that easier for them? We want to help prevent any foreseeable mishaps. So maybe they have pump administered feeds, but they're traveling to a destination where they'll need an outlet converter. Just simple things like that that might not be on their radar. We wanna make sure that we provide troubleshooting if needed, and really we wanna ask so that we too can learn from other travel experiences. I've learned so much from Ron and Carla and, some of the other people with ALS at our clinic, and so I think it's really important to ask and really understand what they're going through. Regarding the medical aspect of traveling, there are multiple clinical considerations which must be factored in when traveling with home nutrition support. So, before providing any travel advice, we want to make sure that PALs are medically stable again to travel. In addition to the general health clearances, like I said, do we need to have clearances from other groups such as cardiology? We just want to make sure that they're safe to travel. We want to see if they have any sort of perilous lab values. Like, do they have grossly fluctuating blood sugars? I know this is as common in our population, but do they have poorly controlled outputs like an ostomy? Or have they been having a lot of vomiting or diarrhea recently that's going to put them prone to dehydration? Do they have recent significant fluid accumulations, or is their nutrition support site access complicated? So, if they have a G tube, for example, is it clogging a lot? Do you see an infection brewing at the site? So, we want to be cognizant of these factors and treat these issues before travel, just so that we can make travel as safe as possible. It's extremely important for clinicians to discuss necessary steps to successful travel with home nutrition support, and really encourage pals to begin planning early for travel. I cannot reiterate that enough. Plan early, plan early, plan early. When planning, we want to consider the final destination, the mode of transportation, the length of travel, and overall complexity of the trip. And these factors strongly influence our plans. So, are they going to a hot destination where they're going to need additional fluids? Will there be a clean water source? Or are they going to need bottled water for everything? How long are they going to be gone? Do they need their regular monthly nutrition supply shipment to come early or to be shipped to the site? Some people have beach homes where they might stay for weeks or a couple months at a time. Will they be administering nutrition support in the airport or on the train or bus or cruise ship? So we're going to get into this more in future slides, but depending on these travel factors, as well as how the patient is from a medical and nutrition standpoint, the traveling can get a little complex. Quick note, this presentation is specific to travel within and from the US, though many of the concepts can be applied internationally. And I really have to add that it's important for you as a dietitian to educate pals and caregivers on self monitoring and the need to take ownership of their care. And while this is important at baseline, proactive planning and self monitoring is a necessity during travel to prevent ramifications associated with poor planning or ignoring signs or symptoms before they leave. It's one thing to have nutrition support issues when the provider is down the street, but it's a whole other ballpark when something goes awry and the person is, say, in the middle of Zimbabwe with very limited resources. In the next slides, we're going to be reviewing formula transportation, laboratory draws, nursing care, prescriptions, and contingency plans. So all these clinical considerations when traveling. So depending on the travel circumstances, home parental enteral nutrition formulas can be carried on by the traveler, shipped to the travel destination, or purchased at the destination. If new formulas will be used while traveling, so either enteral or parental nutrition, dietitians should encourage PALs to try the formula at home prior to travel. It's even wise to encourage PALs to do a trial run of traveling a shorter duration to closer destinations prior to any or longer interstate or international travel. So that way they can troubleshoot any possible formula mishaps while they're still close to home and close to their provider. So starting off at the top with carry-on. Traveling with home nutrition support formula often gives PALs more control, but it does have its considerations. So both EN and PN, these formulas can add a lot of bulk to luggage. I know Ron and Carla can vouch for that. If traveling for a week or more, this may equate to an additional suitcase worth of supplies. And if that is the case, I recommend suitcases of formulas be marked as fragile or handled with care. There are a lot more considerations when traveling with parental nutrition. So you might have multi-chamber bags, which are great. They don't need refrigeration. They have a longer shelf life until they are mixed or activated. Whereas compounded parental nutrition is stable for only 9 days, and it requires cooler temperatures in the 36 to 46 degree Fahrenheit range. Injectable parental multivitamins and some additives require refrigeration as well. So PALs who are traveling with compounded PN will need to keep the PN in a cooler and periodically check the cooler temperatures with a thermometer. And we also want to avoid spot freezing of the parental nutrition bags. So we recommend ice packs and not dry ice, and wrap the PN bags in bubble wrap so that they don't have direct contact with the ice packs. Now, traveling with enteral nutrition, if it's ready to feed or powdered, it has fewer considerations than PN because it's more shelf stable. These enteral nutrition products, they can tolerate larger temperature ranges. They often take up to a year to expire, but it's still essential that pals and cows understand any differences in storage and preparation of enteral nutrition prior to traveling with these products. Pals who prefer home blenderized enteral nutrition may have additional refrigeration considerations depending on the ingredients. Right, so next up is shipped. Shipping formulas and supplies may be an option. The big bonus here is that shipping supplies allows pals to travel more lightly and not have to lug around any additional suitcases. However, shipping can be costly. It's risky as supplies may be delayed or mishandled during shipping. So, to ensure supplies arrive in time, PAL should consider shipping supplies to arrive a day before the PAL is going to arrive at destination. And in regards to parental nutrition, shipping compounded PN may not be possible depending on the destination, especially if it's outside of the United States. Packages may be held up in customs, they might get lost. Pharmacy regulations and insurance coverage for shipping formula may vary by state. So, home care and insurance companies need to be contacted before to see if that's even an option. In addition, some countries may have varying liquid importation rules. And finally, if you do think you're going to ship your supplies to, say, a hotel, proper supply handling should be explained to a hotel manager ahead of time, especially if the supplies are going to require refrigeration. So, really ensuring a trustworthy person is on the receiving end of those supplies. And lastly, we have purchase at destination. So, again, a huge bonus is that you don't have to lug around the supplies while traveling. It's important to research available products ahead of time. So, EN formulas can often be purchased at different locations, and the product that PALS is on in the US may not be the same. or even available at their destination. But if needed, dietitians should discuss formula substitution options with PALS before they travel. Of note, the big name Ian manufacturers, I'm not going to name them, you know who I'm talking about, but they actually they list their product availability by country on their website. So that's really cool that you can go online and be like, hey, what's the comparable in this country if they want to purchase on site. Pal's interested in traveling with a small blender and blenderizing their foods for enteral nutrition should experiment beforehand. However, GI distress might be a concern for blenderized EN in countries where they have varying cuisines. Again, if you're traveling to a warmer climate, we might need additional fluids to meet hydration needs. So we always want to make sure there's a clean water source available, particularly for our enteral nutrition dependent pals. Supplies such as gravity bags or syringes should always be rinsed in clean or bottled water. And any oral intake, including dental hygiene, if you're taking a shower and accidentally get water in your mouth, we want to make sure it is clean water because we want to avoid any sort of GI distress or illness from contaminated water. So some PALs may require lab draws, nursing care, or prescriptions during travel. Lab draws and nursing care during travel generally apply to our home parental nutrition consumers, but the timing of routine lab draws may safely be extended in some cases, allowing the PALs to avoid lab draws during travel. So if that's a possibility, we recommend discussing that up front. And however, in some cases, lab draws are going to be needed during travel. Outpatient labs should be identified prior to travel and know that most outpatient labs will accept orders from an out-of-state provider, so that's helpful. Regarding nursing care, PALs may need to work with their nursing provider for training on dressing changes or other necessary nursing care to achieve independence prior to travel. So, for those people that have balloon tubes and are going to be gone for a couple months and need to have their balloon tube replaced, can they reasonably be trained on replacing that themselves? Like lab draws, home nursing at the travel location should be set up before travel. But of note, if home nursing care is needed, this often requires an order from an in-state or in-country provider. And then lastly, prescriptions. Any anticipated prescriptions should be ordered and filled ahead of travel. But if there is a pharmaceutical need that comes up during travel, depending on the prescription, regulations may require a provider practicing in that state or that country to write the prescription um, to be filled in that state or country. So if that is the case, the recommended way for PALS to obtain prescriptions in different states or countries is to visit a local on-call or urgent care medical facility. Okay, unpredictable or emergent events may occur during travel. Honestly, I say prepare for something to happen. Supplies may not be delivered, they might not be available, hospitalization may be needed, symptoms may manifest, there might be power outages for our pump assisted feeds. So it's recommended that traveling pals prepare contingency plans ahead of time. And you as dietitians should discuss communication protocols with PALs beforehand. So PALs should know who within the ALS team to contact if an issue arises, when or under what circumstances to contact them, and how best to contact them. For example, who will they call if they need Ian supplies emergently? They didn't arrive on time and we're panicking. How can we get the supplies? How will they request a script for antibiotics, say if they have traveler's diarrhea? Do you want them to use the portal or is there a more direct line if the need is urgent? PALs must be educated on when to contact the clinical team for guidance versus go straight to the emergency room. In addition, PALs should be encouraged prior to travel to research and make a list of healthcare facilities closest to their travel destination. So I personally ensure all my pals have my work phone number and email address. I inform them that I'm the main contact for all things nutrition and tube related, but I'm going to triage their concerns to the right team member. So if it's our surgery team versus our neurologist or nurse practitioner, but that way they know that they can just contact me and they know to contact our nurse practitioner if they don't get a hold of me because that's the backup. However, I am on staff at our ALS center. So, depending on your clinic setup, it may make more sense for them to contact the provider on staff versus a dietitian. If, say, you're an inpatient dietitian, you just get pulled for ALS clinic day. So we're going to review some troubleshooting for enteral nutrition. I'm not going to review troubleshooting for parental nutrition, just like I mentioned in the beginning, that a lot of our pals are dealing with enteral nutrition. So if your pals has nausea or vomiting or diarrhea while they're overseas, we want to first consider the formula ingredients or concentration, but hopefully it's not formula related, as the patient should have tried different formulas prior to travel unless they are purchasing on site. But did the formula stay out in a hot environment too long and spoil? Contamination, if they're in a foreign country with a questionable water supply, again, did they consume any contaminated water? Did they eat any fresh fruits and vegetables that were washed in local water? Did they open their mouth while showering? Did they brush their teeth with tap water? Again, you want to tell them these things beforehand, but you also want to use that as part of your troubleshooting. Do they have an infection such as C. diff that's causing diarrhea? Administration. Maybe they want to maximize their travel time and they're administering their enteral nutrition too quickly so they can go tour. Or, if they use half containers and refrigerate the other half, maybe they're administering it before it fully warms up, and that's causing some of the GI distress. But maybe it's not enteral nutrition related at all. Maybe there's just GI issues such as, reflux. Maybe they're stressed out. They've developed a peptic ulcer. Maybe it's just constipation. Maybe it's new medications, that sort of thing. So I usually recommend based on the scenario to stop the feeding, knowing that you can vent the tube if they're able to, and the goal is to prevent dehydration. So above all, I'm not so concerned at this point to get calories and protein in, especially if it's a more acute thing. I just want to prevent dehydration above all else. Making sure that you ensure the formula is not spoiled, contaminated, that they're washing their hands, using the appropriate handling techniques. Again, ensuring the formula water is administered at room temperature, not too quickly, ruling out any sore infection. But if symptoms persist, we definitely want them to go to a local facility to get checked out. But again, telling them who to contact and when. So I would say if you are experiencing constipation and diarrhea, come to me. But again, we're going to define constipation. So if they're not having bowel movement for more than 3 days, if their stool is hard, if they're straining, for diarrhea, if they're having 3+ watery stools a day, come to me and let's talk about it. If they have bright red blood in the stool, again, I'm going to first triage this and talk with our physician or nurse practitioner. But maybe it's just hemorrhoids or a fissure or an anal tear, something that's not too concerning. In which case we would just take measures to prevent constipation. Um, but then for pain or oozing or leakage at the access site, I'm usually going to ask them to send a picture or FaceTime. We can usually handle this remotely, as usually it's an issue of hypergranulation tissue. But knowing that they might need prescription medication if there is a concern for infection, a bigger issue is something like beard bumper syndrome, or if their tube, especially if it's a balloon tube, is coming out or getting loose. I tell them, don't even flirt if you think you are getting dehydrated. Go straight to the ER. If your tube or your line is displaced, go to the ER. If you have black or tarry stool, go to the ER. You can contact me when you're in the ER. But these are things that I don't want to flirt with, and you just want to go straight to getting medical help on site. Now we're going to talk about non-clinical travel considerations. So the next slide, I'm going to be reviewing air travel rules, packing and baggage consideration, communicating medical needs, and travel insurance. So the Transportation Security Administration, or TSA, airlines, and U.S. Customs are all separate entities with their own sets of rules. So travelers should be aware of the obstacles presented by each of them and how to best be prepared. Be encouraged to build extra time into their travel schedules, because that way we can mitigate any sort of stressful situations such as additional security screening, flight changes, waiting for wheelchair assistance. Know that TSA does allow for nutrition support on flight, as well as medications, equipment, and medically necessary equipments or liquids over the 311 limit. rule, as long as it's within reasonable amounts, which they don't really define. And just going over the 3-1-1 rule, I know a lot of people are familiar with this liquid rule, but it limits the volume of carry-on liquids to 3 ounces per one container within one quart-sized bag. But I just read last night they are considering loosening up this, so that might not be an issue in the future. Screenings may include a pat down and swabbing of items. So, from my experience, most of the times, if you're traveling with something like tube feed, they are going to try ask to open one of the containers and swab that. So, I do let my pals know that ahead of time. TSA Cares provides screening assistance for those with medical needs. So, pals can request screening assistance by calling TSA Cares, or they have an online form that you can fill out 72 hours before departure. However, assistance from a TSA supervisor can also be requested upon arrival to the security area. A TSA even has notification cards to download online to discreetly notify TSA screening officers of medical conditions and any sort of implanted external medical devices. And know that travelers may request a private screening if they wish. So I do usually recommend our people with lines for parental nutrition or tubes for enteral nutrition to let the screening officers know ahead of time so that they don't accidentally pull those lines or tubes. Even after TSA screening is successfully navigated, airline personnel may not allow carry-on baggage exceeding size and weight limits onto the plane. Checked bags that exceed size and weight limits may be subject to additional fees. Therefore, baggage limits should not be exceeded whenever possible. But if necessary, traveling pals can contact the airline's customer service department before the flight to discuss medical baggage policies. They can also consult the airline's website on requirements to waive extra bag fees for medical baggage. And as Ron and Carla will mention, clinicians should encourage PALs to seek wheelchair assistance, which is provided through the airlines and can be added to the flight reservation. And I love the idea of wheelchair assistance. Um, you get pushed through the airport, which can help PALs conserve their energy. It provides automatic help with baggage. And also, those in wheelchairs are often brought to the front of the TSA line and are pre boarded on the plane. So that gives them extra time and space to stow medical baggage. I also encourage PALs to carry proper documentation, which I'll show in a future slide. While TSA doesn't require medical documentation, I think it's helpful to have letters for screening officers or airline personnel or customs officials. And that can include a letter from your provider saying that you are medically cleared to fly, that these are the list of supplies that are medically necessary, including listing the tube feeding formula and if they have syringes or gravity bags, knowing that they should be allowed to infuse nutrition support en route if needed. And if traveling internationally and if feasible, and you're just a go-getter pals, copies of the letters should be written in the language of the country to where one is traveling. But I do recommend that travelers keep a copy of the letter in each of their bags just in case the bags get separated during their travel. Okay, so baggage, packing and baggage considerations. We know that luggage can be lost and travel can be delayed and shipping errors may occur. So whether supplies are carried in checked luggage or they're shipped, arranged to arrive at the destination, or if they're purchased on site, it is prudent for PALs to pack extra formula and supplies in a carry-on bag, just in case of an emergency. In addition, it's helpful for PALs to make and carry a list of the supplies to ensure all supplies get packed and that those supplies make it back home and that those supplies are easily communicated in the case of an emergency. So on this slide, you'll see an example list of supplies. So obviously they're going to need their formula, syringes if they have a low profile tube that they need the extension sets. They're doing gravity feeds to make sure they bring the bags and the IV poles, although you can kind of rig up a gravity bag with a clothes hanger or something else. Pump feeds, the bags, IV pole, pump, charger, making sure you have a converter if it's in a different um, country that requires conversion. Batteries are nice to have just in case there's an outage. If they're on parental nutrition, again, pump, additional fluids and additives if needed, making sure that there's a fridge or at least a mini fridge in the room to hold the parental nutrition. Site care supplies such as barrier cream or gauze, whatever they need. Again, that clean water supply hand sanitizer or soap, and clean water for hand washing. This includes, while they're in the plane or train or automobile, wherever they are, and medication and a list of medications, including the names and doses. So we as dietitians should work with PALS and CALS to compile a document with the PALS health information, nutrition support needs and supplies, and healthcare contacts to share with their travel companions. So the document should include specific information regarding access devices. So their access type, the size of their tube, when it was last placed or replaced, in case a repair or replacement is needed. And as you'll see on this slide, the Oli Foundation has already made it easy for us. They offer a travel packet designed to help people with home nutrition support communicate their medical needs during travel if they're ever admitted to an unfamiliar institution. So all they had to do is fill out the blanks. They've done all the dirty work for us. It's a great resource. And lastly, know that state and federal health plans do not typically offer coverage while traveling abroad. So really encourage your pals to research and consider supplemental health insurance or travel insurance, or even medical transport while they're traveling abroad. So now I'm going to hand it over to Ron and Carla.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll just tell you a little bit about our experience. Ron noticed oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Next slide, please.
Okay.
Okay, that's our timeline. Ron noticed a slight slurring in his speech in late 2019, which drove us to do some investigating and going to a series of doctors to try to figure out what was going on. That resulted in a diagnosis of bulbar onset ALS in July of 2020. After initially struggling with the diagnosis, we accepted it and decided that we were going to live with ALS and not die from ALS. And
within a month, we both retired from work, decided to rent out our house, and bought one-way tickets to Mazatlan, Mexico. We left the United States on December 1st, 2020. Since my disease progression was slow, we decided to travel as soon as possible. Our first trip was a cruise to Alaska.
We loved it and we craved more adventure. At the same time, Ron was losing weight and he was having an increased difficulty in swallowing. So we decided to have a feeding tube placed in December of 2021. And then we were ready for more travel. The next slide, please. One moment.
Between March and June 2022, with 10 total pieces of luggage filled with EN and supportive supplies, other medical equipment, and our clothes, we traveled from Mexico to Dallas, Egypt, Miami, Colombia, through the Panama Canal, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Mexico, Las Vegas, Philadelphia, New Jersey, Maine, New York, Boston, El Salvador, and back to Mexico.
Throughout this time, we traveled by car, air, cruise ship, and charter bus. Next slide, please. So during that time, we came up with a list of—
Hold on, Carla. The sound is a little bit soft.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me better now? Or do I need to talk louder? Okay.
Oh, that sounds good. That sounds good.
Okay, I'll move a little closer. During that time, we came up with 10 lessons learned that we want to share with other pals and cows traveling. Lesson one was really, as Stephanie stated earlier, planning ahead. Every airport, hotel, event, venue, they all approached our situation a little differently. And so things can take a lot longer to navigate. So the better you plan, the better your time will be. Number two is to carry your doctor's letter with you. We didn't need it a ton, but there were times then when we had to have it. And so it's better to always have it with you just in case. That helped us with security, being able to help us with our medication and our nutrition, so that things moved a lot smoother. Number 3 was medical equipment and supplies fly free. No matter how many things you have, they fly free. Typically, well, I'll say this, that's with most airlines. We did come up with 1 or 2, maybe overseas, that we did have to pay. We typically checked 3 carry-on size bags because you don't want it too big. And we realized that that 50-pound limit was a lot better in the carry-on size. And so, but we would check them, and in that we would check all of our supplies as well as 120 cartons of EN formula. Number 4, we used airline support for disabled passengers. Even though we were early on, my husband could still walk at the time and was resistant to wheelchair help. We did realize that that was a lot easier in our travels. And so please accept the wheelchair assistance and pre-board each flight with the other high-need passengers. It just made things much easier and saved time and energy so that we can enjoy our destination. And then number 5, think of the nursing mothers are the model. Feeding while traveling meant finding discreet places to either syringe or bolus feed or bag feed. Like many nursing mothers, we sought limited private spaces for personal modesty or hygiene, and to avoid offending or being the source of curiosity for our fellow travelers.
6, cruises are great. Cruising allowed us to unpack once, set everything up, and then enjoy seeing multiple destinations. Flying and short hotel stays were much harder. 7, rest. After trying to engage in highly scheduled adventures, we decided we did not have to do everything. We stayed on the ships, buses, or in our room when I was tired. We looked at our itineraries and determined the places we really wanted to see and rested up for those adventures. 8, TSA pre-check. TSA pre-check allowed us to avoid taking everything out and off when going through security. It was well worth the cost. 9, packing. We found some items helpful to bring with us to support my EN needs. Over-the-door hooks for gravity feeds, an extension cord, a universal power strip, a 3-ounce container of dish detergent, disinfecting wipes, and a hand towel. 10, ask for help. We found that people everywhere are ready and willing to offer a hand if we just told them what we needed.
And that's it. If anyone has questions later, I don't know if Stephanie's opening up for that, but we are more than happy to share more details on the things that we learned during our travel time.
Thanks, Ron and Carla. That was amazing. But I'm just going to end it with a summary that traveling with home parental or enteral nutrition is doable. Providing pals and cows with travel resources up front saves them time and headache and increases their safety. And we want to be proactive in talking with pals about travel, have them plan early, and learn from them. So here's some references and resources, but I'm going to open up to question and answer.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stephanie, Ron, and Carla. That presentation was great, and we'll now open up for a Q&A and a discussion. So if you want to drop a question in the chat, you can do that. If you want to raise your hand and ask a question, we're open to that as well.